You're listening to another episode of the Speak Up podcast, and in today's episode, we'll be talking to Charles about his own journey from having physical condition to coming to a crossroads with his mental health and how he approaches his own recovery from his own perspective. The format's a little bit different today, but he's definitely got something to add. Very unique way of looking at things and looking at life. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. Charles joins me now. How are you doing, Charles? Good.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So we'll just jump straight into it, really. So, just to start with, can you tell us a bit about yourself and why you decided to come on the podcast?
Yeah, well, I saw a video that you posted on Facebook about your mental health recovery roadmap. I found it really interesting and really insightful. And I thought that, as you've said, that my experiences and my journey, there's quite an interesting perspective that I could possibly offer to your listeners. So I thought, why not reach out, try and get involved?
Yeah, amazing. And I know you personally, obviously, Charles, from having grown up with you as well.
Yeah.
And I know you've got some physical conditions, much like myself. How much does that factor into impacting your mental health?
Well, I was born prematurely, cerebral palsy. All four of my limbs are affected. The left side's weaker than the right side, so slower and slightly shorter. But the way that it's impacted my mental health over time from being born to now is that, aside from the physical way, the physical form and my body and the way it is, or my disability, physical disability, there's no mental or metaphysical disability. So I was brought up just like any other able-bodied child. I've full cognitive awareness, intellect, articulation, all of these sorts of things. So, for example, whenever I would go to a doctor's appointment as a child, they would never speak directly to me. They would only speak to my parents. And my mum would deliberately say, well, he can speak for himself, because I can. And a lot of my life has been about, through performance, poetry and rapping and things like that, has been about proving that point that, one of my poems particularly is about actions not always been as loud as words. And the way that there's a way that it's affected me particularly, in the sense that I know the difference between the able world and the disabled world. And sometimes throughout my life, I felt like I've been on a tightrope between the two. When I was younger, I never knew my position. I never knew my place. I never knew where to be between the two. Am I disabled enough to be in special groups? Am I not disabled enough? Am I able enough to get a university degree? Am I too disabled for that? All of this, that, and the other, all sorts of questions. And for a while, it felt as though it would have been easier to be cognitively disabled as well as physically disabled, because then at least I would know my position and place. And that was obviously how I felt throughout my youth, not how I feel now. Mm-hmm. But what I've tried to do for young people particularly, especially if they have a disability in any form, physical or a learning difficulty, is try and help them figure out that their differences make a difference. And if they're different, it's to make a difference. So to not be too hyper focused on, well, I'm not this way, I'm not that way. if that makes sense.
Yeah, use it as an advantage sort of thing.
Yeah.
With all that being said, then how did you come to a crossroads with your own mental health? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, the crossroads came when I found myself. I'm 32 now, and when I was about 25, 26, I think I'd just finished my bachelor's degree in music, or not long since finished it, maybe a year or so after finishing it. And I just found that I was repeating a lot of the same cycles that were causing me anger, frustration, pain, whether that's physical pain, mental pain, anxiety going through the roof, PTSD being triggered left, right, and centre. And I just realised that I'd never really taken the time to look at it properly. I'd just, I don't know, put on a brave face and dealt with it. I went to open mics and I did all sorts of youth work and I did all sorts of things, but I never really felt present in myself. And it always felt kind of like work or like a responsibility. Because I can do something, I should, rather than doing it because it's who I am and what I want to do. And I came to this realization one day that if I don't actually have a look at what's going on and sort of who I am as a person, then I'm just going to repeat these cycles of being angry at the same things and being in the same pain and not helping myself. I was terribly stubborn, overly stubborn. I mean, I've almost gotten rid of it, almost. But to the point where I would injure myself physically and mentally. Sometimes I'd overdo things. I'd get myself overwhelmed. I'd get myself in an unnecessary emotional state or position. And you get in a cycle where it's like, why are these things happening to me? Why is there so much drama? This, that, and the other. And really, there comes a point, which was the point for me of, well, if I can't do anything about it now, I'm not going to. And I rang my brother up this particular day, and I just said to him, I'm done. And he said, what do you mean you're done? I says, well, I don't want to end my life. I love my life. I love my family. And I love who I am in my roots and in my integrity. But I'm done with these cycles. I'm done with the repetition of not really knowing who I am, not really knowing what I want to do. Am I doing things because I think I have to, because I'm expected to, because I'm obligated to? Is anything actually bringing me joy? Do I feel any joy? I wasn't very confident in myself. I didn't believe in myself. But on the face of it, you wouldn't know at all for a long time, ever since I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I'd just not faced these issues. I mean, I have generalized anxiety disorder and PTSD, which stems from when I was a child, and I had corrective operations and surgery to attempt to help me walk, because I started walking around about the age of 8 or 9, and no idea how. Nobody's any idea how. I just started. I just began randomly, and there was a lot of promises made by physio and doctors and all of these sorts of things. When you're 8 or 9 years old, and the only thing you can't do is walk, that's what you want to do. That's what you're focused on. So, you put all this trust in these people and they let you down. And then from that point, I became this hyper independent, super strict, only relied on myself. Only I'm responsible for what I do, and I've got to do everything because I can't trust anyone. And that's where a lot of those cycles, as I got older, that's where they stem from and where they just kept repeating. And since I'd finished university and I didn't have any major responsibilities, no children, I'm in a position where I'm unfortunately fortunate enough to not have to work. I'm in full receipt of benefits for my disability and mental health. So I just thought, do you know what? I'm just gonna let this happen. I'm just gonna be open to whatever there is, however ridiculous I may have thought it was in the past. I mean, I had a course of counselling previous to this, and it was kind of a process where because I knew what they were talking about, I felt as though I knew what to do. I felt as though it wasn't really useful. It wasn't really touching base. It was like I just found myself sat there going, yeah, well, I know this, but what good is knowing it? And I think it's because I was so closed off from allowing anybody else in or anything else in other than what I'd built myself. So from this course of being open and just going, right, I'm going to put my hands up and I'm going to just, whatever comes, I'll welcome it because it can't be any worse than where I'm at.
Yeah.
So from this course, I underwent some cognitive behavioural therapy and some art therapy. And I, in conversation with a few people about CBT, I found myself quite lucky because the experience I had of it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't individual sessions for a start. It was group based, and it was more of a study of what cognitive behaviour is or what the subconscious is, as opposed to going there every week and them saying to you, how do you feel this week? How did you feel last week? How do you feel now? How do you feel after the session? Do you feel in fear for your life? Do you care about yourself? That sort of series of questions that's asked. It was more of a study of, right, well, try and think of the cognitive system, of the subconscious system, like a washing machine that doesn't get cleaned out. So you put a load of washing in there and you've got all the dust, foil, whatever's in your pockets, whatever you've been carrying around, still stuck to the machine, and you haven't been cleaning it out. You haven't been paying attention to the build-up. You haven't been managing the build-up. Or you don't know to check the machine.
Yeah.
And then of course there's the image of the iceberg, isn't there? That we only ever see the tip of it, whereas underneath it's possibly quite huge, possibly quite a lot to handle, to tackle. And being a more of a, I suppose, just because I'd come out of university and I was in a academic frame, let's say, I found this really helpful because I was able to apply it to my everyday life as approaches and tools, as opposed to just feeling as though I was sitting there listening to somebody reel something off and it wasn't applying. It was like, right, I will try this. almost like physical exercise. You know, if you get a personal trainer or a physio saying to you, try these stretches, try these lunges, try sleeping on this side, try eating this, try doing that.
Yeah.
And I just found that it helped. Piece of advice I would give, though, personally from my experience, is unfortunately it seems as though we have to get to that point I was at of like, well, there's nothing worse that can happen, to actually start allowing that in and have it make the positive changes that it can make, or you know, and it seems a shame that it's not taught from the very beginning. You know, that mental health isn't taught from the very beginning to be as important as physical health, on a line with physical education. I said to you in a previous conversation, or I think I said to you in a previous conversation, if you had a bullet wound in your head and you were bleeding, you'd go immediately to A&E. But if we've got one mentally, we've just, you know, the typical sense is to just deal with it, to manage it. You'll get over it eventually. You've got people who need you to do things. You've got work that you need to do, you know. Whereas if we saw mental health in the same way we do physical health, we'd go, no, hang on a minute, wait a minute. I've got to get this sorted out. I've got to take leave. I've got to be kind to myself. I've got to breathe. I've got to get this healed.
Yeah.
And that's what the crossroads spurred me to do, because it was either do it or don't do it.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, that's great sort of explanation of how that CBT's helped you. You mentioned about in the previous conversation about energy is currency. Can you explain what this analogy means?
Well, it's one of the mantras of mine, and it can have a couple meanings. But the main is to think of every action, every effort, as costing energy, like we would think of money. You know, like we would think of food and things that we want costing money. So we have to work for money to pay for what we need and pay for our bills and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And that we've only got so much of it. You know, so we can't go on holiday whenever we want. We can't buy whatever we want whenever we want. And it's the same with energy. So you have to be careful what you spend it on. You know, I try and think of, you know, am I spending it on a situation or a person that's going to give energy back to me? Do I mind spending this energy without getting anything back? You know, these are the questions I ask myself. And if the answer to either of those are yes, then I'll spend that energy. If the answer's no, I won't spend it, because energy is my currency. And then, of course, there's the deeper level that energy itself runs on currents, and then currency is finance and money.
It's a really good way of
understand it on many different levels.
That's really good. Yeah, I really like that one, to be honest. When we talked about that, I really like that analogy. And what would your rules for living be with optimum mental health? This is a bit of a pie in the sky one, really, I thought. But what would your sort of rules be for living with optimum mental health?
Well, I found this an interesting question, because it takes me back to the position I was in with the therapy, and also I underwent some weight management classes, because I'd gotten quite heavy as well. You know, through all of the stuff we've previously discussed. And I think one of the things that helped me was that when they said in the weight management class, when they said, what's your goal? What's your target weight? I said to them, well, I just want to be able to maintain myself. I just want to be able to live. So if we go off the body mass index, the BMI, and we just say, right, what's the optimum BMI for me? Then we'll go from there. Because I've always been a person with a good appetite. I've always had a good relationship with food, and I didn't just take that into the weight management. I took it into the cognitive behavioural therapy and the art therapy, and really anything I do of like it's not really rules. It's more focusing on your intention and what your morality is, and then allowing that to inform the way that you carry yourself. One of the other main mantras I have is remove expectation and obligation and replace them with hope and intention. So that a way to explain that is I suffered and still suffer with generalized anxiety, and a lot of the time my anxiety would come from the subconscious or self-applied expectations that I would put upon myself or obligations I would put upon myself whenever something was happening. So say it's a family barbecue that's supposed to be a nice time and you're supposed to enjoy the food and all this, that and the other. I would be thinking about, right, how do my parents expect me to be? What do they want from me? If I was tired, I'd still go and I'd just sit there instead of being like, well, actually, I'm quite tired. Because I'd try and push myself to those expectations, those obligations. Feeling obligated to eat quite a lot of the food because it's been cooked. Feeling obligated to smile, to not bring anything down. Even if I've been having trouble with something, don't bring it up because that brings the situation down. It's supposed to be a nice time. So it takes a heck of a lot of practice and a heck of a lot of reflection. But yeah, trying to remove the subconscious sense of expectation and obligation, because of course, you're going to have your obligations. I mean, like if you're a working person, that's your obligation, that's your occupation. You have to work in order to make money and all the things we've discussed. You're going to have expectations of things because they inform our present and they inform our possible future. But I find that if we get in the habit of stacking extra ones on top, then we don't leave much room for actually enjoying the moment, taking the moment in, talking to people, enjoying things, telling the people that you love them, expressing that love without condition and without fear. So yeah, it's not really rules.
No.
Because I try to be aware that these things are, the world is forever changing. So, what works for you today might not work for you tomorrow. But if you can try and build a sense of your own intentions and your own sort of moral compass and try and always use that as a base and go from there, I don't think you can go too far wrong. And I think
No.
if you're kind to yourself in that way, then you'll be able to maintain optimum health, whatever that is for you. People talk about. I was once asked in a doctor's surgery, "Are you of normal health? Are you of normal strength, Mr. Kirby?" And I said, "Well, what's normal?
Yeah.
Because my upper body is a lot stronger than most people."
Yeah.
And that taught me that normal is whatever is commonplace for the individual. If you always have beans on toast for every meal, and that's what you've always had, that's going to be normal to you. Whereas in terms of society, it may not be. Oh, you don't eat anything else, da 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 da. So yeah, it's a sense of trying to have a ground level, a base level that you can always go back to. You can always take a breath, remind yourself of who you are, why you are, and how to achieve that.
Yeah.
If any of that makes sense.
No, it all makes sense. It all makes perfect sense. Yeah, definitely. And with that being said, how do you approach situations that are maybe a little bit stressful? Maybe we've covered this already, but yeah.
Well, as corny as it may sound, I often say to people that, like, be your best friend and care about yourself the way that you would care about somebody that you love. So if you find yourself in a situation that might be stressful, just remind yourself that today is a new day. There's no obligation on you to succeed. There's no obligation on you to be all right. You don't have to be okay with what's going on. You don't have to be comfortable. If you find yourself overwhelmed by noises or things like that you didn't expect, or a new place, a new space, new people, just take a second to breathe, be your own best friend, say, right, we've got this, we know where we're at, and go from that, what I expressed before, from the base of morality, from the base of in your intentions. And if I believe that if your intentions are good and the context of your intentions are clear, then you can't go too far wrong.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask people questions or to admit that you don't know something, because the only way to know something is to tell someone you don't know. Try to learn new things, try to keep yourself, try to keep your view of the world broad. But it all stems from you as an individual first. The better you can understand yourself, I think the better you will be in all circumstances.
Yeah.
It was very difficult for me to start going back out after lockdowns. More in a sense of trying to figure out where the world's at. So not necessarily in a sense of being afraid of catching COVID or being afraid of germs or human contact, but it was more sort of where's the world at? What's the political temperature?
Yeah.
But through the practices, I thought to myself, well, on an immediate scale, So on a real base level, a really basic level, right in front of me now, does it matter whether I know what the political temperature is? Does it matter whether I know what everybody thinks?
Yeah.
Not really, because I've still got to get up in the morning, and I've still got to go to the shop, and I've still got to do things if I want things. If that makes sense. So it's like it's working on as smaller scale as possible. And another one of my mantras is that process is progress. So it doesn't matter how, like, if you look at working out in the gym, it doesn't matter how low on the weight you start. What matters is that you're there and you're giving it a go and you're trying. And then eventually, as you back yourself and you surround yourself with people that back you, you'll work your way up, or you'll find things that work better for you. Maybe you'll go swimming instead of lifting weights. Maybe you'll walk instead. Maybe you'll be a dog walker, which will help you be motivated to go out and be in those environments. Or maybe you'll sea swim with a group of people, and that'll give you a focus point, a routine, something to look forward to. And I think this is also what it is about, trying to have this open mind of, well, how many ways can I actually approach this? So if I'm feeling stressed in a situation, and people I know, like my friends that I know me, are there, then I will communicate with them, and I will say to them, I'm not feeling too good. I don't quite know why, but do you mind if I just hang around, or just exist, or just be in this space? And most of the time you'll find, well, 99% of the time you'll find that people don't mind. Like, they care, obviously. They care that you don't quite feel yourself. They care that you might not be happy. They care that you might be tired. But all they really want, like, if you've been invited out to a meal and you don't feel like eating, all they really want, if they're good friends, and you've got a good, or you've got a good connection with your family, or whatever it is that you're there, is that you're present, and they want to enjoy your company, or they want to share something with you, they want to share an event with you, or they want to share their hobby with you. It's not, again, it's not that you're expected to, if somebody takes me to a football match, I'm not going to be expected to get out there on the pitch and score a goal. I'm just there to take whatever I take from it. So it's something I'm still looking at and still trying to work out how I would break a situation like that down. So, like, if there was a particular stressful situation, but I think it just, once I took on board these practices and started to believe in myself, this baseline, this foundation would always come back to me. I would always go there first and work from there, grow from there. So I think it's about making sure that you have your foundations, and knowing that if at any point you don't quite have them, it is okay.
And not having obligations as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And just because the thing is, there's a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot we have to contend with. There's a lot of information being beamed at us 24/7. So really, all we have to do, if we have to do anything, is live and do our best. And that might seem easy for someone like me to say who doesn't work and this, that, and the other. But I could put it in my perspective of, well, I suffered with severe anxiety from a child, I suffered with severe PTSD from a child. I'm still in pain now. I've injured my back in 2 different places. All this sort of stuff. I could play disability top trumps all day, but there's no point in that. I think the point of life is to just do our best, and as long as that's good enough for us, then that's what should matter, because you're not going to be able to please everybody. And if you go around pleasing everybody but you're not pleased, then
what sort of life is that? Yeah,
that's where I was at, before the crossroads. Everybody thought I had a handle on my life. I had my stuff together. I was making music. I was at open mics. I was in a relationship. All of these things. I had everything going for me, but inside, I wasn't there. Didn't have my foundations. I think if you can gather your foundations and you can gather something that's just come to mind actually is a piece of advice I gave to somebody, and it was they were trying to I think we were having a similar conversation, and they were trying to work out, well, who am I in my at my base level? What is my integrity? What are my morals? What do I align with? What don't I align with? And I said to them, well, try and think about the person you would be if you were in a car accident and came out of it with amnesia. So if you didn't remember who your family were, you didn't remember who your friends were, you didn't even remember your own name, you didn't recognize yourself when you looked in the mirror, would you still have the same sense of humor you have? Would you still be as respectful as you are? Would you still speak the same? Would you still hold yourself to certain standards? Because I do often go into the sort of breakdown that, yes, there's obligation and expectation, but standards aren't necessarily the same as that. They aren't as locked in as those. They are to help you to guide your morality. But I'm going slightly off point, but going back to the point of amnesia is like, would I still care? Like, would I still be as empathic as I am if I had amnesia? Would I still, for instance, a situation I often think of is if I was in a hospital bed and I had amnesia and my mum came into the room and she was talking to me and she was really upset because I didn't recognize who she was. I didn't remember a single thing about her. Would I still be respectful? Would I still say something like, I'm very sorry. I understand you. I can empathize with your pain. I can understand your pain. I hope to know you better, but at this moment in time, I don't. So if that makes sense, it's like that kind of thing. So if you had amnesia, would you still take offense by the same things you take offense by? So like morally, So like if you don't agree with people cheating on people, if you don't agree with stealing, if you don't agree with base level things,
Yeah.
would you still have that level? And I think if I had amnesia and I didn't know who I was, I'd still have the same sense of humour. I'd still communicate the same way. I'd still have my base level of intelligence, and I'd still find the same things that I find unsettling, and I'd still get happiness from the same things I get happiness from now. So like music, games, particular colours. There'd still be things I associate with, and I think if you can think that way, then it gives you a base level of like, right, well, I'll always have this, and I'll always be this kind of person, and like one of mine is I'm always willing to be wrong. I'm always okay to be completely wrong. So, if there's a portion of this podcast where I've been talking about something or talking about a particular subject or associating a particular word with something it doesn't mean, and somebody says, well, it doesn't mean that, then I welcome that because it means I've learned something. And I do that without any ego, without any personal. I don't feel personally attacked when somebody tells me I'm wrong. I mean, obviously there's a way of going about it, but that comes down to context and intention. If the context is within a discussion and the intention is to inform that person that they're wrong and not to destroy the person or debilitate or belittle the person, then I'll take the criticism, or I'll take, I'll say, oh, right, well, what does it mean? What does this mean? I mean, I don't know if that's explained any of what you wanted to get.
No, I think it does perfectly. I think you've sort of summed it up there. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I thought I'd go through. I've got a sort of free verse that I'm drafting at the moment that I think relates to what we've been talking about and relates to finding self.
Is this poetry that you're doing at the minute? Is that right? Yeah, awesome.
I've always been writing and rapper since I was about 8 years old. And
I can remember. Yeah.
You'll remember that I used to do workshops. I used to write my own music. I got my university degrees through writing my albums. But as of last year, I went back to more traditional forms of writing because I found that they helped me talk about things like this in ways that wouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, lend themselves too well to structured 4x4 beat or a rap beat, or the more formulaic pop song, or a kind of standard, if that makes sense. So it allows me to be a bit more free and a bit more expressive, and it's been really nice to explore different subjects in different ways. And then also I have just a list of a couple of the sort of mantras or little rhyming bits and pieces that, like,
cool.
If I had them all written on my wall, they'd be sort of like the my commandments, so to speak. But again,
cool.
not rules, just guidance. Just little reminders of, right, this is the baseline. So I'll start with those, and then I'll do the verse, if that's all right.
That's all right. Yeah.
So one of the first ones is something that, well, the first two actually are a couple that my dad lived by. The first one is, it's not the life in the years, but the years in the life. He was diagnosed with a blood cancer in 2011 and passed in 2021. But he was initially given like just 2 to 5 years, I believe. But throughout that whole process, he had this mindset of, well, it's more about what I do with the life I have left than about how many years I live. And I think that's what helped him live so many years. I think that's what helped him enjoy his life to a point where he was able to live it as long as he did. And another one is that if you can wake up in the morning, you know who you are, what you are, where you are, you know who you love and what you love, then that's not a bad start.
That's really
and
good.
I always thought that was quite nice because, I remember what it was like. I used to stay up playing video games constantly as a form of escapism. There'd be sometimes when I wasn't even enjoying what I was doing. It was just escapism, to disappear into a world or be a superhero or whatever it is. And I would dread waking up in the morning because as soon as you wake up, all of the stuff comes back. The big dark cloud, everything that you should have done that you haven't done, and all those expectations, obligations, all the concerns, all the worries, all the pain, all comes back. But this little bit of advice of my dad's was like, if you can wake up in the morning and you know who you are, what you are, where you are, you know who you love and what you love, then it's not too much of a bad start, is it? It's pretty good.
Pretty good baseline.
If you can wake up another day and you're aware of who you are and where you are and what you actually care about, then there's nothing you can. What I take from that is there's nothing that can really stop you.
Yeah.
You've started at the best point possible, even if you don't have breakfast that day for whatever reason. And along those lines, more of something I came up with whilst exploring writing and talking to other writers. It was about writer's block. So, you're staring at a blank page and you don't know what to do. You don't know where to start. You don't know what to write. And I just came up with this little idea that the best place to start is to do just that. Start.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you start at the start, whether you start at the middle, whether you start at the end, whether it makes sense, whether it's a name, whether it's a colour, whether it's, and you can apply that to anything you do. If you've got to take the rubbish out, or you've got to declutter your house, or you've got to cook a meal, it doesn't always matter which steps of the process you go through. Just start somewhere, and then before you know it, you've started and you're in a groove. To link it back to anxiety, I think in general, whether you have generalized anxiety or not, as kids, we sometimes we got up in the morning early. We didn't want to wake up early. We didn't want to go to school. But once we were there, we were all right.
Yeah.
So really, the focus point is the best way to start is to just start.
Yeah.
And off of that, I thought that these first three were maybe sounding a bit too simple. So in response to that, I say that just because something sounds simple or is simple to understand, it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't mean that the journey won't be long. It doesn't mean that you won't come across difficulties. It doesn't mean that because something worked for someone else, it'll work for you. Just because I'm saying these things in a very matter of fact way, doesn't mean that I'm sort of belittling anybody's struggle. What it represents is the process that I've been through, the things that I've experienced, the people I've experienced, and the people I've listened to. So, it's like the saying, easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like that. Another one is want is desire, need is require. So if you ever need reminding, it's a nice little rhyme.
I like that.
Want is desire, need is require. So if you desire it, then perhaps you don't need it. If you really do require it, then you might not want it, but you probably do need it. And I found this a lot while I was going through therapy. There were certain things that I felt, not that I didn't want to approach, but I felt reluctant to approach. But I tried my hardest, and I'm glad I did, to push through those barriers and realize that this was something that I needed to do, that was required in order to heal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, to use the full metaphor, it wasn't something that the therapist just desired from me in order to use for their personal gain or for a case study or whatever. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
So you're going to find that in any and every walk of life. I've got a few more still. About 4 more.
Yeah.
One I reminded myself of recently was feelings first, solution second. And to me, that means, so to give you a scenario, because of everything I've been through and the way I talk to people and the way I communicate, people often come to me and talk to me, and and I listen because I understand the importance of listening. When I was a child and I was going through all of that stuff, all I wanted was somebody to listen to me. That's all I wanted, just to listen, just to let me get it off my chest. But every now and again, you often find yourself going, they'll get through half a sentence and you often find yourself going, well, that's because of, or, well, what you want to do is, no. Acknowledge the feelings first. Acknowledge what's going on. Validate that somebody is having a problem with something and that how they feel about it is perfectly okay, because it's them, it's their own unique situation. Doesn't matter how many times I've been through it or somebody else has been through it. Doesn't matter whether it's the first time they've been through it or the 300th time they've been through it. Acknowledge the feelings first, validate them, and then work on a solution after that. Because I think we can get lost in trying to immediately help because we want to, and it's a nice thing, and it's a noble thing, to want to be helpful and to be helpful. But sometimes the best way to be helpful is to listen and acknowledge and be patient, and to understand that, there's only so many emotions. Like, I liken them to notes in a scale. There's only 12 to 13 notes that can possibly be used in any song. It can be higher. Those 12 or 13 notes can be higher or lower, but it's only any combination of them that can make a song, and usually it's the same combination. So that's very much akin to how emotions work.
Yeah.
So, let's say my pain tolerance or my patience for certain things might be quite high because of what I've been through, but the person next to me might be really distraught because they misspelt a word in a sentence at school or at uni. Now, it wouldn't be very helpful of me to say to them, "Oh, well, that's no big deal. You want to know what I've been through?" No. Listen to them and go, "Right, well, I understand where that's coming from because I wouldn't like that myself." And then be like, "Right, well, maybe the solution is to proofread your work before you hand it in."
Yeah.
This is the main one that I try to follow. This is the main one that I always try to go by. So if anybody takes anything from this, let it be this one. It's not what's been done, but what you choose to do about it. So I can have offended somebody. I can have done something that was out of my character. I can have put myself in a situation that became out of my control. I can have upset somebody. Something could have happened to me. Someone could say something awful to me. But once that has been done, it's been done. So the step now is, what choice are we going to make about it? Are we going to choose to stir it up in the pot and perpetuate drama? Are we going to choose to scratch the wound instead of treating it? Are we going to choose to put it under the carpet? Or are we going to choose to understand what went on, what we feel about the situation, what other parties involved may feel, and try to move forward from there? Or are we going to try and get a good night's sleep so that we can think about it the next day or whenever it next comes up? But I think, for me, it's one of the best pieces of advice on an individual level. It's like, okay, that's just happened, or that's just made me feel really nervous. But never forget that you always have a choice in what to do about it. So even if the choices are rubbish choices, the choice is always there. So, I could, if I get upset by something and I'm out in the pub, say, I could choose to just leave, to just abandon everything and run out. Or I could choose to talk to somebody about it, or try to. I could choose to not say anything, which is what I used to do. There's all of these different choices. So, a lot of the time, you'll go through the process, and as you go through the other things we've discussed, like my mind now can think of all those possible variables and choices in tenths of seconds. For example, there was a situation in my local pub. I was talking to a friend of mine about Macbeth that I'd gone to see in Leeds, and I was talking about how profound I found the play because it explores things like the matters of PTSD, even though in the time when it was written, nobody really knew anything about it. And even now, we're only just touching the surface. I expressed that it explores other themes, such as schizophrenia, because Macbeth has hallucinations of seeing people and seeing a dagger before him and seeing it in his hand, a bloody dagger. Is this a dagger I see before me? Let me clutch thee. And there was a gentleman opposite me who I didn't know, and he said, "What do you know about schizophrenia?" And I took the split tenth of a second to say to myself, right, this has happened. My intentions were good. The context of the situation is one where we're having a discussion. It's open. Now, I don't know this person. They could be either a sufferer of schizophrenia, or they could have lost a family member to it, or they could be caring for a family member who has it. So what's my choice? Do I take it personal and go, well, I actually do know what it means, and I've had friends who have family members that have schizophrenia. But then I'm thinking, well, what am I doing that for? Am I doing it because I've got my back up? Am I doing it to defend myself? Am I doing it to look good? And then after going through another couple of choices, I just thought to myself, well, I don't know this person and they don't know me. So they don't know the kind of person I am. They don't know that I'm totally open to getting it wrong, as previously discussed. I'm totally open to having the discussion. I would never use a word or a phrase out of context. I care very much about that. So I thought to myself, in those maybe 2 seconds, I just said, no, you're right. I possibly don't know as much about it as you. I'm sorry it's offended you. Thank you for your input. And that disarmed the situation. Instead of me getting either my back up, getting offended, or feeling as though I had to prove a point. And it was all based on the energy I felt from that person, what was going on around me, and general awareness. So yeah, it's not what's been done, but what you choose to do about it. And more so that, like, that's what makes you who you are. So you could do something that you think is terrible, or something that is actually terrible, but if you choose to try and make it better, it's like, I believe in the 12-step program when it comes to alcohol addiction, or drug abuse, or domestic violence. There's actually a step where they validate and acknowledge their victims and the pain that their victims feel. Obviously, they have to ask whether they can meet them and apologize, and whether it's okay. But there is a process where it's like that person then has to, the person who has done the wrong to the victim then has to acknowledge it without ego without saying, I'm sorry, but I did it because of this. It's just, I'm sorry that this has made you feel like this. I acknowledge this pain, and I hope that me genuinely saying this and delivering this brings you closure. I understand if it doesn't, but hopefully it does. And that's just a couple, quite
Amazing.
a few examples of what that is. And then there's just 3 more small ones. The next 2 are related to each other. So often we hear things like, have some self-respect. What about your self-respect? And I think there's a misconception about self-respect and what self-respect is, because it's more of looking at it this way, in my opinion. Respect for self. So again, looking at yourself and going, right, how do I carry myself? Why? Ask all these questions and have respect for yourself first and care for yourself so that you can give it to others. And onto that is, we hear a lot about self-care these days.
Yeah.
And a common misconception that I see is, oh, I'm having a spa day, or I'm having a bottle of wine. That's my self-care, right? And I understand where they're coming from with that. And I understand the position. But for me, to those that don't know the process, or to those that might not know those individuals' lives, it creates a misconception, because what it should be is constantly caring about yourself all the time. So not pampering yourself, but being like, have I eaten today? Do I need the toilet? Have I slept well? Very, very simple, basic things. But that I think, especially as adults, we forget, because we're rushing about, we're trying to make things work, we're trying to meet deadlines. We feel lousy because we haven't eaten properly. Then our relationship with food goes down, and all of this, that, and the other. So it's like, think of it as care for self and respect for self instead of self-care and self-respect. And then my very last one is, be the example. So sometimes if you find yourself in a situation where nobody else is taking something seriously that you think should be taken seriously, then be the example of that seriousness, but without condition or ego. So don't get soapboxy about it, but just say to people, actually, I think we should look at this. Or an example of, be an example of calm when everything's kicking off, when everything's crazy. My friends often say to me that that's what I am. How can you be so calm when stuff's going on? And it's like, well, for one, if I get irate and angry, then I'm just adding to it and making myself upset. So I'm trying to be an example of calm for myself, which comes back on caring for myself, respecting myself, trying to keep a level head, trying to know what the actual situation is, what's going on around me, trying not to trigger my PTSD or my anxiety. But yeah, there's loads more in my diary over last year, but these are the ones I pulled out So hopefully there's one or two, or some explanations, or some examples that even if it's just one person takes it and goes, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I've got that.
A lot of good from a lot of what you've said. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, or they can take it and adapt it to something of their own. Then I think it can help. I'll leave my side of the conversation, as far as I know, with this free verse, with this poem. So, make choices for you based on experience and education. Do this while not being afraid to listen and learn. Reflect on things at many angles. Try not to subscribe to a single source, or at least the ones that only agree with you. Allow these actions to broaden your view, not to limit or subdue. Don't be overridden by what is heard. Don't follow the herd or even these words. Align yourself with yourself without condition. Do this and you'll find contentment in any position.
I like that.
It's very similar to Rudyard Kipling's "If" poem. I don't know if you've heard it.
No, I haven't. No, but
if you haven't, you should, and you'll get sort of where I'm coming from with it. But I didn't even realise that I'd written something very similar until I visited that poem. I was like, oh, that sounds like my poem. So the title of it is Kirby Meets Kipling. So it's Rudyard Kipling, the author of Jungle Book, and the poem is called "If."
I'll definitely look that up.
If you or your listeners haven't heard it, give it a shout, because it's only short, and it'll give a bit more insight into where my poem is coming from as well.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, you've definitely added a few more than a few nuggets in there of wisdom for people. So thank you very much for that. That's amazing. Very pleased with that. That's the end of our questions, really, folks. So hopefully some of you listeners, you'll have got something from that. Special thanks for Charles for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you. So that's it, folks. So I'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye for now.